How can such a pretty wife make such bad coffee?
Was coffee a problem?
Try Folgers, the mountain-grown coffee.
Good evening. For 4 days now, some of the 20th century's most extraordinary diplomatic maneuvers have been taking place in Moscow. Vice President Richard Nixon and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev have thrown away the rules of polite diplomacy, it would seem, and are engaging in rough and tumble impromptu debate. The topics range from rockets, communism and capitalism, war and freedom, to color television and the kitchen sink. The words sound fierce and harsh, as if they might increase international tensions and plunge the world into a new Cold War crisis.
The word MacGuffin.
I'll do it in sections then, okay? Just, yeah.
The word MacGuffin. The word MacGuffin.
The word MacGuffin could be a Scottish name.
Comes from a conversation between two men.
Comes from a conversation between two men.
In a railway train.
In a railway train.
One says to the other.
One says to the other.
What is that?
What is that
package you
package
have above
you
your
have
head?
above your head? On the luggage rack.
Said, oh, that's a MacGuffin.
That's a MacGuffin.
I said, well, what is a MacGuffin?
The other man says, what is a MacGuffin?
Take your hat off. Name, Hitchcock, Alfred. Height, 5'6". Weight, prisoner refuses to make a statement. Here's his record. 1940, picked up on suspicion. 1942, spellbound. 1944, notorious. 1955, rear window. 1956, the man who knew too much. Anything to say, Hitchcock?
Well, sir, I admit it ain't a good record, but I'm trying to do better.
Better? Do you call this doing better? Appearing on television.
I'm sorry, sir, but my family was hungry.
Take him away.
Wait a minute, sir. You've got the wrong man.
Was shrouded in a smothering blanket of fog when scores of people heard a low-flying plane heading south. Then an explosion. An army bomber lost in the overcast had crashed into the towering Empire State Building, parts of it blasting completely through the 79th floor and landing across the street in a disaster that remains the most singular in New York City's history. The disaster on 34th Street.
I think my mother scared me when I was 3 months old. She said, boo.
This evening's tale begins with a nightmare-like experience, but that is only a prelude to the terrifying events which follow.
They say that if you meet your double, you should kill him, or that he will kill you. I can't remember which, but the gist of it is that two of you is one too many. By the end of the script, One of you must die.
But first we have another device which can bring tears to the eyes of the more fastidious. A television commercial.
Oh, Mr. McGregor. Oh, thank heavens you're still here.
Oh, I was just about to go home. What's wrong, Janie?
I've got to do something about my coffee.
Is your coffee really that bad, Janie?
Jim says it's awful. What can I do?
Better try this.
Instant Folgers. Is it good?
Tastes good as fresh perked.
I'll try it.
Great coffee. And the folks loved it.
It's Instant Folgers. Tastes good as fresh perked.
And now join me, if you will, while we contemplate the perfect crime.
I have pondered many times, but somehow never understood the meaning of that fateful encounter one August afternoon in 1962. A story I was to find out that was scripted nonetheless by me. I have chewed the details over and over so repeatedly that the memory of it has become inaccurate. Like a film scratched and faded by the years. The episode seems too strange to be real.
Master of suspense, Alfred Hitchcock, has some comments about his latest picture, The Birds.
For over 30 years now, I have been indulging in the occupation of raising goose flesh domestically and in England. I have only recently completed work on the latest picture. The title is quite short, just 2 words. There were 3, but we cut the first word for and call it simply The Birds.
We had replicated Davidson's pet shop on a set at the Universal Studios in Los Angeles. We were shooting an episode that my audience had already come to expect, the scene in which I myself make a fleeting appearance. My 2 white terriers, Geoffrey and Stanley, trotting along the sidewalk in front of me, quite oblivious to the threat massing in the sky above. I substituted a body double for myself so that I could oversee a walkthrough of the shot once more. I was about to reinsert myself into the scene when my assistant informed me that I had an urgent phone call waiting for me in the studio offices. I called a 12-minute break. As I left the set and navigated the studio's staircases and corridors, I experienced a sense of déjà vu. I had indeed walked through this environment several times before, but now it felt different. Whereas the security guard always addressed me by name and with a certain reverence, on this occasion, strangely enough, he failed to recognize me. And then when he did, he gasped, "I'm sorry, Mr. Hitchcock. I thought you'd already gone upstairs." "You were mistaken," I responded. "Yes, perhaps," he replied. "The other gentleman was older." The exchange left me rattled. Yet it was the least of the surprises I would encounter that day.
Vice President Nixon escorts Soviet Premier Khrushchev on a preview of the United States Fair in Moscow. It's the official opening of the American Exposition, dedicated to showcasing the high standard of life in our country. But on this occasion, traditional diplomacy goes by the board by a crackling exchange between Nixon and Khrushchev, begun off camera and finished off before the American Ampex color videotape recorders.
This is a special report on one of the most unusual diplomatic events in recent history.
Featuring on the one hand, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev, the irrepressible and outspoken leader of communism. On the other, the Vice President of the United States, Richard Nixon, cast in the role of defender of capitalism and American foreign policy. Part of the unscheduled fireworks was recorded on videotape. We only want to live with Americans in peace and friendship because we ourselves are a powerful country, and we will be friendly with each other. Other countries will be friendly too, and if anybody comes in a fighting mood, we could pull his ear ever so little and tell him, don't dare. Wars are not allowed now. This is a time of atomic weapons. Any fool could start a war, but no person in his right mind would want the war to continue.
Baby, baby, where did our love go? And all your promises of a love forevermore. Baby, baby, I've got this yearning, burning, yearning, feeling inside me. Ooh, deep inside me, and it hurts so bad.
Good evening. I can tell by the rude noises you are making that you are impatient to see our film. However, there will be a slight delay. Tonight, as a special attraction, we shall present some television commercials. They will be injected at various points during our picture to keep you from getting too engrossed in the story.
You mean it's as bad as yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
No improvement at all?
Mm-mm.
Now, what am I gonna do? Oh, Mary, hi.
Hello, Jane.
Listen, help me out, will you? Harold hates my coffee. What kind do you use?
Instant Folgers.
Instant Folgers?
Tastes good as fresh perked.
Gee, this coffee is delicious.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same kind we've been using, is it?
Mm-mm.
As I advanced towards my assignation, I felt a deep sense of foreboding, as though I were entering some kind of trap, instigated by another mind, another director. When I opened the door and stepped into what I expected to be the production office, I found another scene entirely. In some respects, it was like the tea room at Chasen's in Los Angeles. In others, it was like the salon at Claridge's back in London, and yet it precisely resembled neither.
How do you do? My name is Alfred Hitchcock, and I would like to tell you about my forthcoming lecture. It is about the birds and their age-long relationship with man.
There is something new in the heavens. Something that has never been there before.
Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this earth. Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, the radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik, the first man-made satellite as it passed over New York earlier today.
нашей планеты родился новый спутник.
There are some instances where you may be ahead of us. For example, in the development of your rockets for the investigation of outer space. There may be some instances, for example, color television, where we're ahead of you.
And here it is, 7-function, remote-control color television, so beautiful it enhances any decor.
But in order for both of us to benefit, you see, you never concede anything.
In what are they ahead of us? Wrong.
In the competition for leadership in space, in the race run by rockets, where is the finish line? Do we end up in a nuclear war, or do we try to live with the constant fear of war?
I share the enthusiasm of Soviet engineers about the cleverness of the American people. But we too, as you know, don't kill flies with our nostrils. For 42 years we have gone ahead, and when we shall overtake you at the crossroads, we shall wave at you.
It took the Soviets 4 years to catch up with the atomic bomb. It took the Soviets 9 months to catch up with the hydrogen bomb. Now, tonight, the communists have established a foothold in outer space.
Beneath an arabesque of cigar smoke, a shadow lay across the floor. It was the trademark silhouette I'd cultivated in my television programs. Did I frighten you? A voice asked. I recognized the voice immediately.
Good evening. I'm Alfred Hitchcock.
Slowly, the figure turned to face me. I've been expecting you, he said. It was as I had feared. The man into whose presence I'd been lured by a fictitious phone call resembled me in every way but one. He was, as the security guard had implied, older.
By an odd coincidence, we have a story about a man who decided to be someone other than himself.
People would say, oh, it's Ron. It's Ron Burridge. You know, the one who looks like Hitchcock. Sometimes it's difficult to believe anyway. It's like looking in a mirror. You can never see yourself as others see you. Yeah, you get people do double takes and, oh, look, what's happening? Oh, it's happening.
Okay, whenever you're ready, go on.
But you'd hear them behind you going, Ron,
could we just start that again? Sorry, I wasn't ready then.
Let's get one with the coffee.
Oh, yeah.
I'm attempting to assist my brother Alfred in introducing this evening's shilling shocker. It is the story of a man who finds himself involved in a mad charade which he neither understands nor can escape.
The word MacGuffin comes from a conversation between two men in a railway train. One says to the other, "What is that package you have above your head on the luggage rack?" He said, "Oh, that's a MacGuffin." So the other man said, "What is a MacGuffin?"
Qu'est-ce que c'est qu'un MacGuffin?
He said, "Well, it's an apparatus
Eh bien, c'est un
for
appareil.
trapping lions in the Adirondack Mountains of New York."
But the other man says, "But there are no lions in the Adirondacks of New York."
The man says, "Well, then that's no MacGuffin."
Well, the man says, "Well, that's no MacGuffin."
Good evening. Oh, good evening. Good evening. Oh, good evening. Oh, good evening. Good evening. Oh, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, sorry.
And I say, "You don't half look like Hitchcock." And I say, "Funny that."
Good evening. I'm Alfred Hitchcock.
Yeah.
And tonight I'm presenting the first in a series of stories of suspense and mystery.
That was hilarious to do.
Called, oddly enough, Alfred Hitchcock Presents.
You could turn, yeah, that's all right.
Johan Grimonprez presenta the Alfred Hitchcock.
I scrutinized the old man's face. The features were mine, all right. No amount of latex, rubber, or makeup could emulate the lifetime of concern stored up in them. "We have scripted this moment together," said my alter ego. "In this very room, it was 1962. But it is 1962, I told him. For you, maybe, he said. Oddly enough, for me, Alfred Hitchcock, it's 1980.
Good evening. I'm Alfred Hitchcock.
You must be mistaken, I protested. I am Alfred Hitchcock. We both are, he answered.
I'm Alfred Hitchcock. I insist.
I felt my own reality slipping away. Felt that I risked becoming no more than a character in someone else's film. I decided to accept the situation and to play along with it, sensing that a failure to do so could prove catastrophic.
And there it was, another post-war wonder right before your eyes.
This, Mr. Khrushchev, is the
television.
One of the most advanced developments in communication that we have, at least in our country.
Good evening, television consumers. This misty bit of ectoplasm forming on the inside of your television screen is one Alfred Hitchcock.
That name's dependable.
Color television will transmit this very conversation immediately. And this increase in communication will teach us some things, and it will teach you some things, too. Because after all, you don't know everything.
That name means quality in every TV set.
If I don't know everything, then I would say that you know absolutely nothing about communism. Nothing except fear of it.
I don't think that translation.
If I don't know something, well, then you don't know anything about communism except fear.
A dog right out of the world's attention today. In a masterpiece of propaganda timing, the Soviet Union announced it had launched Sputnik #2, carrying a live dog reportedly history's first space traveler.
And I don't mean to be facetious at all, but something to be remembered is that there's a female up there circling Mother Earth.
Well, I think the Russians are ahead of us, but there's no reason for panic because there's never any solution in panic.
The rocket that launched Sputnik number 2 is capable of carrying a 1.5 ton hydrogen bomb warhead.
The Russians have licked some of the toughest problems on the basis of the so-called ultimate weapon.
Let's quit acting as if nothing happened, because something has happened, and it has embarrassed us throughout the world.
Not just our pride, but our security is at stake.
The Russians will leave us behind and wait. That the country is in dire trouble.
This may be our last chance to provide the means of saving Western civilization from annihilation.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet. Washington, London, Paris, the whole world is under attack.
The next shot will be the Vanguard going aloft. It is hoped to carry the first U.S. satellite into orbit in outer space.
The U.S. scientists realize the world is watching and waiting, and the Americans who swept this one out at Cape Canaveral know their fledgling is on the spot.
Propaganda defeat for this country.
We slowly turn our eyes back to the charms of television advertising.
Honey, your coffee's undrinkable.
It's pretty harsh.
Well, so's your coffee. You know, the girls down at the office make better coffee on their hot plates.
And he didn't even kiss me goodbye. You know, if I could just make a decent cup of coffee, I could relax. So, relax. Why don't you try Instant Folgers?
Hey, great coffee.
Better than those girls make at the office.
Instant Folgers taste good as fresh perked.
Very nasty.
You know, he had 3 different sizes of suits because his weight fluctuated. So sometimes he was large, sometimes he was small. He had 3 different sizes of suits. The thing is, I spend a lot of my time looking at fat men walking down the street. I say to Eddie, my friend, hey, that little man looks like Hitchcock. Don't tell him. I wouldn't go and say to somebody, you look like Hitchcock, would I? Always sticking out.
If you really are me, I said, then you will know our secrets. Test me if you like, he answered. He waved his cigar at the seat in front of him and said, "Why don't you sit down?" I obliged. A waitress passed by and set down 2 pots. 1 tea, 1 coffee. So tell me, what was in the kitchen cupboard at our flat in Leytonstone? You tell me, he countered. But I want to know if you know. If I told you what was in the cupboard, he replied, I would lie about its nature just as you would. If I had previously harbored any doubts that this man was myself, these words dispelled them. I realized I was playing for my life, and that the next few minutes would be decisive. I waited for my double to make his next move. He waited for mine, pouring himself coffee from the pot in front of him. When did we acquire the taste for coffee? I asked, pouring myself tea. One changes one's habits as necessity dictates, he answered, smiling, though the smile seemed to be directed not at me, but rather to the blonde waitress who was staring at us from the far end of the room.
How can such a pretty wife make such bad coffee?
Do you want coffee in there? Proper coffee, or is that prop coffee? Hey, do you want a coffee? Having worked at Claridge's, which is one of the top hotels in London, in the world, I may have met Hitchcock, just like that, you know, because he used to stay at Claridge's. Oh, my cupboard, that's secret. And then I got a job as a waiter in the Savoy restaurant. These were the menu of the actual day that they were there. And there's Laurel and Hardy. James Mason.
Seems to me you fellows could stand a little less training from the FBI and a little more from the actor's studio.
Cary Grant.
Apparently, the only performance that'll satisfy you is when I play dead.
Your very next role.
Well, I don't have a conversation because I was feeding them, you see? So you don't really have conversations with people. Like some milk? Sugar? Yeah.
I believe I'll have another.
And suddenly got the wanderlust and wrote to BEA, as it was in those days. Come on, boy, you devil. Having worked at the Savoy, you more or less had the grounding for anything. Apart from it's a bit different serving at a table than serving on an aeroplane. And you were a few thousand feet up in the air.
Pigeons are too slow for Mr. Hitchcock and Miss Hedren, who arrive in New York to prepare for the opening of the shock thriller. The well-trained Raven has a part in The Birds, but we think it's going to be Tippi Hedren who'll draw the crowd.
We should hear you more on our television. You should hear us more on yours. You must not be afraid of ideas.
That's what we're telling you. Don't be afraid of ideas. We have nothing to fear. The time has passed when ideas scare us.
Here is the ultimate in television. An amazing new wireless wizard remote control.
Every word that you have said here will be reported in the United States, and they will see you say it on television.
And then Nixon and Khrushchev continued their tour of the United States exhibition, halting at a kitchen. There they held what's becoming to be known as the Kitchen Summit Conference, discussing the capitalist attitude toward women. The Soviet premier looked at a washing machine and said that the Russians had such things too, but he didn't share the capitalistic preoccupation with making life easier for women. On and on they talked about wine and jazz. Both agreed that they didn't like jazz. They got around again to international tensions, the premier proposing a toast to elimination of all military bases in foreign lands. Nixon said he couldn't go along with this, but Khrushchev was not to be deterred. Forcefully, he declared, "If you are not willing to eliminate bases, then I won't drink this toast." And Nixon replied instantly, "I don't like this wine." And Khrushchev, "I like this wine, but not the policy." But the two men did agree to drink to the ladies. There are no special ladies, just all ladies.
Ooh. And so it went. This is Ron Cochran in New York.
And now for our first contestant.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alfred Hitchcock look-alike contest. I got the job because I look like him. That's what they say, but not to my face.
I saw an ad in the Evening Standard saying, "Do you look like somebody famous?"
I'm not Hitchcock.
Preferably dead.
Wanted. Host for television program. Sounds like a job for me. Must be witty, charming, handsome. Apply. Alfred Hitchcock presents.
Then I thought, why not?
Dario Argento presenta Frenzy and Action, un film di Alfred Hitchcock.
And I did this sort of thing for fun.
I got the job because I look like him. And the old boy just don't have the time.
I did a thing for a Japanese company, and they had 3 Hitchcocks. Hitchcock 1, Hitchcock 2, Hitchcock 3.
That will be all, Alfred.
I'm intrigued to know what the other Hitchcocks are like, if I've got any competition. Yeah, you've been digging them up. As long as they weren't taking my jobs. Then we would have to find ways of disposing of them.
Mr. Hitchcock. Mr. Hitchcock.
I feigned a self-assurance I was far from truly feeling. If it is 1980, as you say, you must recall having encountered back in 1962 an elderly gentleman who told you that he too was Hitchcock. I'll tell you things a stranger couldn't know. Those proofs prove nothing, I protested. It's only natural that you know what I know. Or perhaps the incident was so odd that I made an effort to forget it, he answered. Time edits out as much as it records. Eventually, your fate will become mine, he said. Yet you will have utterly forgotten this curious dialogue taking place in 2 times. When it next plays out for you, you'll be who I am. And it won't be tomorrow either. It will be many years from now.
It seems to me that television is exactly like a gun. Your enjoyment of it is determined by which end of it you're on.
You hear me now, speaking? Is that about the right tone of voice?
I think I better shave.
The Soviet Union made a breakthrough in outer space. That made the people of the world begin to wonder whether we were first in science. We're first in other areas of science, but in space, we're not first.
When we have Senator Kennedy stating over and over again that the United States is second in space, what does this do to American prestige?
I believe the Soviet Union is first in outer space. You yourself said to Khrushchev, you may be ahead of us in rocket thrust, but we're ahead of you in color television, in your famous discussion in the kitchen. I think that color television is not as important as rocket thrust.
are in a deadly competition. A competition not only with the men in the Kremlin, but the men in Peking. We're ahead in this competition, but when you're in a race, the only way to stay ahead is to move ahead. Is the United States standing still?
Is freedom in the next generation conquer, or are the communists going to be successful? That's the great issue. And if we meet our responsibility, I think freedom will conquer. If we fail to move ahead, if we fail to develop sufficient military and economic and social strength here in this country, then I think that the tide could begin to run against us.
Soviet spaceship Vostok streaks into the heavens, shattering forever man's isolation on Earth. The Russian cosmonaut circles the globe at 18,000 miles an hour.
I do not regard the first man in space as a sign of the weakening of the free world, but I do regard the total mobilization of the communist bloc as a great danger to us. And we're going to have to live with that danger and hazard through much of the rest of this century.
Mounting the receiving stand, Gagarin salutes Premier Khrushchev and reports, "The world's first space flight is accomplished. I feel very well."
Major Gagarin.
Khrushchev embraces the cosmonaut in a bear hug and kisses him repeatedly on the lips. Transcending the shadows of the Cold War, touching the hopes and imagination of all men. Gagarin's words are unforgettable as he speaks of riding in space. I saw for the first time the Earth's shape. I could easily see shores of continents, islands, great rivers. The feelings which filled me I can express in one word: joy.
We have scripted this moment together, my alter ego repeated. It was 1962.
Here we are. Here we are. That's a man's face. There it is. There it is. There is the first live television picture across the Atlantic. And now has it disappeared? Was that it?
But it is 1962, I told him. Certainly not, he replied. It's 1980. So tell me then, I asked, what's happened in the last 18 years of our lives? That is, in your past, which is now my future. Well, what can I tell you, he replied. The misfortunes you are already accustomed to will repeat themselves. In time,
Benny,
he will come to see that cinema merely confirms the old language. If we were successful, this was because we showed people what they recognized of themselves. Guilt, desire, anxiety, love, death, guilt. Above all, guilt.
The 39 Steps, The Lady Vanishes, Rebecca, Spellbound, Lifeboat, North by Northwest, The Birds.
Well, you know, Mr. Hitchcock put me through a suspense thriller. They built a cage for me, so they put me in a cage this time. And in the cage with me was the cameraman with live crows, which they alternately flew at me. And I was scratched many times and bitten. I had a good one right on the cheek right there.
Oh, I don't like blood at all. That's the funny thing about it, because he likes lots of blood. If I cut my finger, I'd fall over and faint. I had the bird on my finger for a commercial in Munich. They had it on fishing wire, but it fell off my finger and it was hanging. So I found if I kept moving my hand, the bird would concentrate on not falling off, going like this. He was concentrating on keeping his balance rather than fly away.
Nature is there in its most fiercest. Now, the film shows that man takes nature for granted. But if it turns on him, then he's in trouble.
You will make the film we dreamed of for so long, he said. But in the end, you will realize that you have failed. That film was one of the roads that led me to this night. The others, the humiliation of old age, the conviction of having already lived each day, my words, which are now your present, will one day be but the vaguest memory of a dream. Equipped as ever with that fiendish sense of humor he added, "Now this, Mr. Hitchcock, this is the film you will never make. The world will overtake you. History, sudden catastrophes, and global struggles will play themselves out in ways still stranger and more spectacular than your films." "Tell me another thing," I said. "Who wins the Cold War?" He waved away the question as though it were trivial. Becoming more animated, he sat forward in his chair and told me half the movie theaters in the country have closed down. Television has killed cinema, broken it down into bite-sized chunks, and swallowed it like birds devouring their own parent, I said. I knew I could trust myself to come up with a good simile, he chuckled. It is the destiny of every medium to be devoured by its offspring. And we too are not without fault in this. We helped hasten the new format's rise to power.
John F. Kennedy settles into office as the 35th President of the United States, the first president born in the 20th century. He comes to office after one of the narrowest elections in American history.
There is a limit to what the United States in self-respect can endure. That limit has now been reached.
Castro seized almost all United States property in Cuba.
Los imperialistas es que estemos aquí y que hayamos hecho una revolución socialista en las propias narices de los Estados
Unidos. Hitchcock has taken intrigue, suspense, excitement. Warm-blooded men and women take risks, make love, face death. Overall, lurks the mystery of topaz, and nothing is what it seems. In Cuba, an agent visits his mistress, and no one asks why.
Frankly, I feel that television commercials are ideally suited to this type of program. This next one, for example, it's deadly.
Oh, this coffee is criminal.
Honey, you killed the petunias.
Then you admit it. Your coffee really is murder.
Papa eating my coffee, it's murder.
You see, crime does not pay. You must have a sponsor.
Try Folgers, mountain grown for richer flavor.
Well, all right.
You know it's a crime.
Maybe we loved cinema so much we annihilated it, I ventured.
The mountains.
It's possible, he concurred.
Ooh.
We always fell in love with our characters. That's why we killed them. We lingered for a while on the pleasures of murder. I argued that dying was an act of love, of complete surrender. We always played our crimes as though they were love scenes. Intimate and domestic, he murmured in agreement. Television brought murder into the American home, where it always belonged. So tell me, how would you like to die? Come now, he mocked me. We have imagined every type of murder, shooting, strangulation, stabbing, being hurled to death from a national monument, marriage, oh yes, marriage. Marriage can be very deadly. Some of our most exquisite murders have been conjugal, performed in all tenderness with the aid of a kitchen appliance. Personally, I like poison. It can only be administered to those who trust their killer. The family, spouses, lovers. Murder is a gift, like love. So tell me, how would you like to die?
We presented the new print of the birds. They had me sitting outside the cafe with a newspaper, and then they were going around with the spotlight, picking out people in the crowd and showing them on the screen. And then all of a sudden, the spotlight came up to me behind the newspaper. And everybody looks, it's Alfred, it's Sir Alfred. Of course, there was uproar because Alfred was there. So I went onto the stage, and then I said, we're here to present the new print of the birds, but here's the lady, Tippi Hedren, the star of it, and she came on. It was our birthday, Alfred and me.
I want to wish Alfred Hitchcock, wherever you are, a very, very happy 100th birthday.
We got the same birthday, 13th of August.
Good evening. The Alfred Hitchcock of today. The Alfred Hitchcock of 30 years ago.
I'm Alfred Hitchcock. I am. I can prove it. Sure, everybody is. I am. I insist.
совсем как в русской сказке, тихо звенят хрустальные леса Подмосковья. Сюда, на базу охотничьего хозяйства, в январе 1964 года Никита Сергеевич Хрущев пригласил отдохнуть дорогого нашего гостя Фиделя Кастро-Рус и прибывших с ним кубинских товарищей. Охота на лося требует серьезной подготовки. А тут как раз потянуло дымком. Нет лучше отдыха, как у лесного костра, да еще за русским самоваром.
Por eso Folgers es la buena cocina. Su ingrediente de primera calidad es el café cultivado en la montaña, el tipo más rico. ¡Ah, delicioso! Folgers es la buena cocina.
Es el mejor café que he hecho.
Es cierto.
It's described in a scene in an English train. One man says to the other, "What's that package above your head there?" The other man said, "Oh, that's a MacGuffin. It's an apparatus for trapping lions in the Scottish Highlands." The man said, "But there are no lions in the Scottish Highlands." The other man said, "Then that's no MacGuffin."
Television, truly the miracle that has put its signature on our century.
Russian people and American people hear each other's leaders by television talks.
Недавно я вернулся из Вены, где в течение 2 дней встречался и беседовал с президентом Соединенных Штатов Америки Джоном Кеннеди.
I went to Vienna to meet the leader of the Soviet Union, Mr. Khrushchev. Mr. Khrushchev and I had a very full and frank exchange of views on the major issues that now divide our two countries.
Baby love, my baby love, I need you, oh, I need you, but all you do is treat me bad.
We have wholly different views of right and wrong, and above all, we have wholly different concepts of where the world is and where it is going.
Khrushchev's demand that the United States, France, and Britain agree to end the four-power pact governing West Berlin hints a new and major crisis.
We will not permit the communists to drive us out of Berlin, either gradually or by force. It would be a mistake for others to look upon Berlin as a tempting target. The United States is there. The United Kingdom and France are there. The pledge of NATO is there. And the people of Berlin are there. The source of world trouble and tension is Moscow, not Berlin. And if war begins, it will have begun in Moscow and not Berlin.
And then I dreamed I was in a huge theater where one of my motion pictures was being shown. But the theater was absolutely empty. On one wall was a gigantic mirror, and when I looked into it, I didn't see my own face.
They say that if you meet your double, you should kill him. Or that he will kill you. I can't remember which, but the gist of it is that 2 of you is 1 too many. Who says there are only 2 of us, he added mischievously. Maybe there's 3 or 4 of us. He sat in silence for a while, then added, "My whole life has been a setting to film of this moment. Now events have caught up with the film and overrun it. It will end badly for someone, just as it did last time." I interrupted him. "I know what you're thinking. It's the murderer who will tell the story." As I spoke the words, fear surged inside my chest, sharp as a knife. It dawned on me that this might be my own death scene playing itself out. I felt a need to assert my existence forcefully. I glanced about me for a prop, a weapon.
Transatlantic TV.
Good evening, Europe. This is the North American continent live via AT&T Telstar, July 23rd, 1962.
Today's press conference is being relayed by the Telstar communications satellite carrying messages from both sides of the world.
I can now see Big Ben on our monitors, so go, Europe, go.
Le public vient, la chansonnette, tiens, tiens. Les titis, les marquis, c'est parti, mon kiki. La chansonnette après l'effet du tort, car tous les transistors, soudain...
The 22nd Congress of the Communist Party hears a marathon talk by Khrushchev, in which he promises that the Reds are to explode a huge bomb of 50 megatons.
Néon cueilli par un flonflon, un tétard en blouse brun de violet.
Good morning, everyone. An unusual flurry of top-secret military and diplomatic activity over the weekend.
It is a day in Washington when the crisis fever reaches a peak from a secrecy veil over official actions which keeps the nature of the emergency hidden until the last minute.
Unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on the island of Cuba. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
All right, sir. Let me ask you one simple question. Do you, Ambassador Zorin, deny that the USSR is placing medium and intermediate range missiles and sites in Cuba? Yes or no? Don't wait for the translation, yes or no.
Я не нахожусь в американском суде.
And in a momentous decision, President Kennedy orders an arms blockade of Cuba.
The Pentagon says the United States is ready to sink every communist bloc ship headed for Cuba, which refuses to stop under the blockade.
In Cuba itself, 100,000 men were put under emergency orders as they had been during past invasion scares. And authorities assembled thousands in cities and villages to whip up hate of what Castro calls Yankee imperialistic warmongers. He went on to call President Kennedy a pirate.
Bomb is under the table. The audience have been told it's time to go off at 1 o'clock. The conversation, which was so dull, now becomes exciting because the audience are saying, don't talk such frivolous things. There's a bomb under it.
This is a special report. Let's check over at the Pentagon with Charles von Fremd on that. Chuck, is there any late information about those Soviet ships?
Walter, we haven't heard a word for several hours now as to when the confrontation will come about.
We are now in the most dangerous situation since the end of World War II. The next 48 hours will be decisive.
Denouncing the United States arms quarantine against Cuba as a step toward world thermonuclear war, the Soviet Union today ordered its armed forces into a state of combat readiness.
It shall be the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack.
Граждане, воздушная тревога. Если вы, находясь дома, услышали сигнал воздушной тревоги, возьмите заранее приготовленный запас продуктов, не забудьте личные документы. Нужно уверенно и быстро. Страх, паника, растерянность – ваши главные враги. Они могут погубить вас. Закрыть двери защитных сооружений.
We could not deceive one another. Each of us was almost a caricature of the other. I hate your face, I said, which is a parody of mine. I hate your voice, which is a mockery of mine. So do I, he answered, smiling.
I call upon Chairman Khrushchev to halt and eliminate this reckless and provocative threat to world peace and to move the world back from the abyss of destruction.
Emergency announcement. Unidentified planes approaching New York. The red alert is on.
Tomorrow, this siren may mean the real thing. And if you hear it, as you drive in your auto, as you sit in your office, or work at your bench, wherever you are, what will you do?
I'm not sure, I said, if I'm capable of killing you. You're capable of killing off your characters, he answered. Try me, he said. Done, I told him. Done? What do you mean, done? It won't be long now. This is your last cup. Well then, he said, let's get to know each other a bit. Contrary to what you would think from my measurements, I'm not a heavy eater. I'm simply one of those unfortunates who can accidentally swallow a cashew nut and put on 30 pounds right away. As he spoke the words, a trickle of coffee spilled from the corner of his mouth and ran down his chin before dribbling onto his shirt. The cup slipped from his hand and fell to the carpet. I bent down to pick it up and saw, when I looked up again, that he was dead.
The dancing beat heralded the finals of the Star Ballroom Championships at Earl's Court's Empress Hall. Dancing in the amateur class was of a high standard, as you can see. And now a change of tempo for the professionals.
My inescapable fate comes back to haunt me. April the 29th, 1980. Sitting in a chair on the studio lot. The set of a film that ceased to be my own. Another man will come, a younger man. Again, I will be face to face with myself.
Good evening. I'm Alfred Hitchcock.
You must be mistaken. I am Alfred Hitchcock.
But I'm Alfred Hitchcock. I'm this.
The 39 Steps, The Lady Vanishes, Rebecca, Spellbound, Lifeboat, North by Northwest, The Birds. What those movies had in common is that they were directed by Sir Alfred Hitchcock, who died in Hollywood today.
The master of suspense is dead, Sir Alfred Hitchcock.
His passing was more serene than that of many of the characters in his 53 films.
Thank you so much, Ron. Thank you very, very much.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, those of us who work in television have a technical term for this part of the program. We call it the end.
Добрый вечер.
Здравствуйте, товарищи. Генеральный секретарь ЦК КПСС Михаил Горбачев и президент США Рональд Рейган.
What if free people could live secure in the knowledge that their security did not rest upon the threat of instant U.S. retaliation to deter a Soviet attack? That we could intercept and destroy strategic ballistic missiles before they reached our own soil? But isn't it worth every investment necessary to free the world from the threat of nuclear war?
So you've been to school for a year or two and you know you've seen it all. And that is coming and you'll go far back east, your time don't crawl. Play ethnic jazz to parade your snares on your background stereo. Bragging that you know how the niggas feel cold and the sun's got so much so. It's time to taste what you always fear. Right, God will not help you here. Brace yourself.
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. Our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us?
There are known knowns. There are things we know that we know. There are known unknowns. That is to say, there are things that we now know we don't know. But there are also unknown unknowns. There are things we do not know we don't know.